Imagine creating a single product that generates over $1 trillion in revenue. Sounds impossible, right? But that's exactly what Apple did with the iPhone. In fact, if the iPhone was its own company, it would be bigger than McDonald's, Coca-Cola, and Disney combined. But here's the crazy part. When Apple launched the first iPhone, even Steve Jobs didn't know how big it would become. At first, Apple's biggest competitors, Nokia and BlackBerry, laughed at them. Even Microsoft CEO Steve Ballmer said the iPhone would never succeed. So how did iPhone not only prove them wrong, but also turn Apple into a trillion-dollar company? Today, we are breaking down Apple's business strategies, marketing tactics, and financial genius that made the iPhone the most profitable product in history. Let's get started.
Before the iPhone, Apple was just a computer company. Their Mac computers had a loyal fan base, but they weren't dominating the market. Meanwhile, cell phones were everywhere, but they were bulky, slow, and frustrating to use. Then, in 2007, Apple completely changed the mobile phone industry. But success didn't happen overnight. There were massive risks, doubters, and even near failure. So in this video, we'll break down 1. How Apple turned the iPhone into a $1 trillion product. 2. The game-changing business strategies that made it possible. 3. And most importantly, what lessons you can learn from Apple's success. Before the iPhone, Apple was nowhere near the tech giant we know today. In fact, just a decade earlier, Apple was on the verge of bankruptcy. In the 1990s, Apple was struggling to compete against Microsoft. Their computers were expensive, their market share was shrinking, and by 1997, Apple was losing $1 billion per year. They were so desperate that they even had to take a $150 million bailout from Microsoft just to stay afloat. Then came Steve Jobs' return. Jobs made some bold moves, slashing failing products and focusing on innovation. Under his leadership, Apple introduced the iMac and iPod, which helped bring the company back to profitability. But they still had a big problem. Apple was just a computer company. Meanwhile, the world was changing fast. The early 2000s were the rise of mobile technology. People were moving away from desktop computers and spending more time on their phones. But there was a problem. Cell phones were terrible. Internet access was painfully slow. Most phones relied on small, clunky keyboards. There were no real smartphones with touchscreen capabilities. The biggest players at the time were Nokia, BlackBerry, and Motorola. These companies dominated the industry and didn't think Apple stood a chance. But Steve Jobs saw an opportunity. He believed that a truly smart, touchscreen phone could change the way people lived. And that's when Apple took a massive risk. They decided to build a phone that nobody had ever seen before. On January 9, 2007, in front of a packed audience at Macworld San Francisco, Steve Jobs walked onto the stage. Dressed in his signature black turtleneck, jeans and sneakers, he was about to unveil something that would change history. He looked at the crowd and said, "Today, Apple is going to reinvent the phone." Then, with a pause for effect, he introduced the world to the very first iPhone. A phone with no buttons, no physical keyboard, just a full touch screen, an iPod, a phone, and a revolutionary new way to browse the internet, all in one device. The crowd erupted in applause, but not everyone was convinced. Many tech executives mocked Apple's idea. BlackBerry's leadership laughed. They believed people would never give up their physical keyboards. Nokia dismissed it. They were the world's #1 mobile brand and thought the iPhone was just a gimmick. Microsoft's CEO, Steve Ballmer, even said, "There's no chance that the iPhone is going to get any significant market share. No chance." But Apple had something none of these companies had: a vision for the future. While Nokia and BlackBerry clung to outdated designs, Apple bet everything on a touchscreen experience that was intuitive, sleek, and powerful. This wasn't just another phone, this was a game changer, and Apple wasn't done yet. With an aggressive marketing campaign, Apple built up massive anticipation before launch. By the time the iPhone officially hit stores on June 29, 2007, something unheard of happened. Customers lined up outside Apple stores for days just to buy one. The iPhone sold out within hours in most locations, and within just 1 year, Apple had sold 6.1 million iPhones. It was the beginning of a revolution. Apple didn't just create a phone, they created a luxury experience. Back in 2007, most smartphones were priced between $150 to $250. But when Apple launched the first iPhone, they set the price at $499, more than double the cost of its competitors. Most companies would have lowered the price to sell more units, but Apple did something different. They made the iPhone a premium product. Instead of competing on price, Apple positioned the iPhone as a status symbol. Instead of targeting everyone, they focused on early adopters and tech enthusiasts. Instead of making the iPhone easily available, they limited stock, creating scarcity and hype. And guess what? It worked. On launch day, people lined up for hours, some even camped overnight, just to get their hands on an iPhone. By making the iPhone expensive and exclusive, Apple created something even more valuable than a product. They built desire. But here's where Apple's pricing strategy gets even smarter. Instead of lowering the price of iPhones over time, Apple introduced higher-end models with premium features, like the iPhone X, iPhone Pro, and iPhone Max. This allowed them to increase their average selling price every year, while still selling millions of devices. And the results? Massive profits. In 2022, Apple's iPhone revenue alone was $205 billion, which is more than the total revenue of companies like Nike, Netflix, and McDonald's combined. So what's the lesson here? Apple proved that people don't just buy technology, they buy status, brand identity, and exclusivity. By pricing the iPhone as a luxury product, Apple didn't just sell a phone, they sold a lifestyle. Apple didn't just sell iPhones, they built an ecosystem so powerful that once you're in, it's nearly impossible to leave. Most companies focus on selling products. Apple focused on building a system that keeps customers locked in for life. Here's how it works. You buy an iPhone. You want a MacBook because they work seamlessly together. You store your files on iCloud. Now you need Apple's paid cloud services. You get an Apple Watch. Now you're fully inside Apple's ecosystem. Each product connects effortlessly with the next, making it inconvenient to switch to competitors. This is why 90% of iPhone users never switch to Android, even when Android phones have better specs or lower prices. Apple's ecosystem creates loyalty beyond reason. And Apple takes this even further with its subscription services. Apple Music, iCloud Storage, Apple Arcade, and Apple TV Plus. These services make sure Apple continues making money from you even after you've bought the phone. The result? Apple now generates over $85 billion per year in services alone. That's more than McDonald's and Starbucks' annual revenue combined. So what's the business lesson here? Apple proves that owning a customer is more profitable than just selling a product. They don't just sell hardware, they create a lifetime customer relationship. And that's why they dominate the market. Apple doesn't just sell products, they sell emotion, status, and identity. Most tech companies focus on features and specs, but Apple does something completely different. Instead of selling a product, they sell a feeling. Here's how Apple's marketing strategy made them a trillion-dollar brand. 1. Simplicity over specs. Apple never overwhelms customers with technical jargon. Instead of listing processor speeds or RAM sizes, they focus on what the product does for you. Their ads don't talk about megapixels, they show beautiful photos taken on an iPhone. They don't promote battery capacity, they show people using their iPhones all day without worry. This makes Apple's marketing easy to understand and emotionally powerful. The power of minimalism. Apple's ads are clean, sleek, and distraction-free. They use white backgrounds, simple fonts, and dramatic product shots to create a feeling of luxury and sophistication. Compare that to competitors like Samsung or Xiaomi, who often overload their ads with too many features, graphics, and specs. 3. Creating hype through exclusivity. Apple doesn't just release new products, they make every launch an event. Steve Jobs' keynote presentations were like Hollywood movie premieres. People didn't just buy Apple products, they lined up for hours, even days, to be the first to get them. This made the iPhone feel like a rare, must-have item. The result? Unmatched brand loyalty. Even when Apple increases iPhone prices, their customers still buy in record numbers. Even when competitors release phones with better specs, Apple users refuse to switch. In fact, Apple customers are so loyal that 79% of iPhone users say their next phone will also be an iPhone. And this loyalty pays off. The financial impact of Apple's branding. Apple spends less on advertising than competitors like Samsung, but still sells more iPhones. Their brand value alone is worth $516 billion, more than Coca-Cola, Nike, and Disney combined. So what's the lesson? Apple proves that marketing isn't just about selling a product, it's about creating an experience, a status symbol, and a loyal fan base that keeps coming back. The iPhone wasn't just a phone, it was a platform. And what made it truly unstoppable? The App Store. Before the App Store, mobile apps were limited and difficult to access. Most phone manufacturers controlled which apps could be installed. But Apple changed everything in 2008 when they introduced the App Store, giving developers a way to create and sell apps directly to iPhone users. And here's the genius part. Apple takes a 30% commission from every app purchase, subscription, and in-app transaction. So every time someone buys an app, Apple gets 30%. Purchases an in-game item, Apple gets 30%. Subscribes to a service like Spotify or Netflix through the App Store, Apple gets 30%. This created a money-making machine that runs 24/7. How big is the App Store today? The App Store generates over $85 billion per year, making it one of Apple's biggest revenue sources. Over 1.8 million apps are available, covering everything from gaming to productivity. Apple has paid over $320 billion to developers worldwide, fueling the growth of major tech companies like Uber, Instagram, and TikTok, all of which started as iPhone apps. But Apple wasn't done yet. Seeing the success of recurring payments, Apple expanded its business model into subscriptions and services. Apple's subscription empire. Apple now makes billions every year through iCloud storage. Users pay monthly to store their files. Apple Music competes with Spotify. Apple TV Plus competes with Netflix. Apple Arcade, a subscription gaming service. And the biggest power move? Apple introduced Apple One, a bundle that locks users into multiple subscriptions at once. The financial impact. Apple Services revenue alone is now worth more than McDonald's and Starbucks combined. The iPhone is no longer just a device. It's a gateway to an entire economy that Apple controls. So what's the lesson here? Owning the platform is more powerful than just selling the product. Apple didn't just make money selling iPhones. They built an entire digital empire where every tap, swipe, and purchase adds to their wealth. This is why Apple is now worth over $3 trillion, and why their dominance isn't slowing down anytime soon. On August 2nd, 2018, Apple made history. It became the first company in the world to reach a $1 trillion market valuation. That means Apple was worth more than Facebook, Amazon, and Google combined. But how did they get there? It wasn't just because of the iPhone, it was because of everything Apple built around it. The key factors that led to $1 trillion. 1. The iPhone became the most profitable product in history. By 2018, Apple had sold over 1.5 billion iPhones worldwide. The iPhone alone was generating more revenue than entire Fortune 500 companies. 2. Apple mastered the premium pricing model. Instead of competing on price, Apple raised iPhone prices, launching models like the iPhone X at $999. This meant, even if they sold fewer units, they were still making higher profits per sale. 3. The App Store and services business exploded. By 2018, Apple's services division was bringing in over $37 billion per year. Subscriptions, cloud storage, and app sales made Apple less dependent on hardware sales. The impact of becoming a trillion-dollar company. To put this into perspective, if Apple was a country, its economy would be bigger than Saudi Arabia or Switzerland. If you had invested $1,000 in Apple stock in 2001, it would have been worth over $500,000 in 2018. But here's the craziest part. Apple didn't stop at $1 trillion. Just 2 years later, in 2020, Apple became the first company to hit $2 trillion. And by 2022, they reached $3 trillion, solidifying themselves as the most valuable company on earth. So what's the lesson here? Apple didn't just build a product, they built a system that keeps generating wealth. From premium pricing to an ecosystem that locks customers in, to creating a platform where other companies make money for them. Apple proved that the best way to dominate an industry is to control every part of the experience. And with new innovations in AI, augmented reality, and finance, it's clear that Apple's journey is far from over. The trillion-dollar milestone was just the beginning.
So after everything we've just seen, what can we actually learn from Apple's $1 trillion iPhone success story? Turns out there's a lot. Number one, build a brand, not just a product. Apple just doesn't sell phones. It sells status, lifestyle, and exclusivity. Lesson, people don't just buy products. They buy what it says about them. So position yourself or your business as premium, unique, or must-have. Number two, own the ecosystem. Make sure once you're in, you will never want to leave. Lesson, if you're building a business or a brand, think beyond just one-time sales. Find ways to keep customers coming back, whether that's a subscription, a service, or a loyalty program. Number three, marketing is everything. Apple's success is 50% great products, 50% world-class marketing. Lesson, the way you present your brand, products, or even yourself matters more than what you are actually selling. First impressions count. Number four, premium pricing works. Never competes on price. They charge more and make people want to pay more. The lesson here, competing on value and experience beats competing on price. Price cheap and people see you as cheap. Price premium and people see you as premium. Number five, adapt or die. People didn't stick to computers. They pivoted, evolved, and dominated new markets. Now, let me ask you, which of Apple's strategies do you think made the biggest impact? Do you think it was their premium pricing model, their marketing genius, or their ecosystem that locks customers in for life? Drop your thoughts in the comments below because I'd love to hear what you think. And hey, if you found this breakdown valuable, don't forget to hit that like button to let YouTube know this content is worth sharing. And if you're new here, subscribe because we're diving deep into more case studies, business breakdowns, and financial success stories every week. Before you go, don't forget to download my free journal designed to help you identify and replace limiting beliefs about money. It's filled with guided prompts, empowering affirmations, and actionable steps to keep you on track. Think of it as your personal tool to build a stronger money mindset. I will see you in the next video. Thanks so much for watching.